Reform school taxi letter used as a political football. Same old politicians bickering. Oh well, we can either indulge the bickering, throw our heads up and say, sure, what can I do? Nobody's going to solve my problem for me. Or we can put our foot on the gas and get to work and start looking after number one and the people who number one cares about. Okay. So that's article number 1. Let's go on to article number 2. This one is the BBC again. Is this the BBC? Let me see. It is the BBC, but it's not allowing me to go into it. Okay, so we're going to have to go on to the next one. So let's have a look and see. What do we have? We have a Guardian article. And sometimes the Guardian makes me subscribe. Is this going to make me subscribe? No, it is not. Okay, so here's article number 2. Let's read out the headline and see where it takes us. The headline is as follows. In a historic career of firsts, Nancy Pelosi might be remembered as Trump's most formidable adversary. After nearly 4 decades in Congress, reactions to the former House Speaker's retirement have proved emblematic of America's partisan extremes. Nancy Pelosi arrived in Congress in 1987, aiming to spur a reluctant Washington into taking action against the AIDS epidemic that was then ravaging the gay community in her hometown, San Francisco. Nearly 4 decades later, she will exit the House of Representatives after a historic career in which she has made her influence felt nationwide. A Democrat who was the first woman ever to serve as Speaker of the House, her fingerprints on landmark legislation passed during Barack Obama's and Joe Biden's presidencies that affected millions of Americans and today remain among the most contentious topics in the Capitol. Okay. Let's read this last wee bit. In a country that grew increasingly polarised during her time in Congress, it should be no surprise that reactions to her departure are textbook examples of America's partisan extremes. So here we have Nancy Pelosi. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the article is essentially saying that she might be remembered as Trump's most formidable adversary. We've read a little bit of her career. You know, she's been in the, what is it? The House of Congress. Is that what it's called? The House of Representatives for 4 decades, essentially. And her fingerprints are all over legislation passed during Obama and Biden's presidencies. And these landmark legislation pieces that were passed apparently have affected millions of Americans today. And she remains a contentious topic. Nancy Pelosi in the House of Representatives. Now, what do I think when I read this article? It's actually my thoughts. I have a similar thought process to the previous article. Nancy Pelosi in the House of Representatives, 4 decades. She's been there, passing legislation during Obama's presidency and Biden's presidency, perhaps a whole bunch of other presidencies as well. And she seems to be a contentious figure. She splits the public. Some people maybe love her, some people hate her. Nothing unusual there with politics. But I always find these articles funny. I do find them funny because The Guardian, we've read out a number of articles from The Guardian, political articles. And it's actually quite incredible because I haven't actually went back and counted. But it seems to be every time The Guardian has a political article, it cannot help but put Donald Trump's name in the title. The Guardian really loves to put Trump's name in the title. And again, we've got this whole, it's almost as if Pelosi has retired, apparently. So she has retired after 4 decades of service. And the article is sort of pitting her against Trump, claiming that she's Trump's greatest adversary. Now, I don't know a lot about American politics and the history of American politics. I'm not going to try and make it out as if I'm an expert in this field. But the first thing that comes to my mind when I read this article, as an Irishman, is obviously, I couldn't give a shit. Now, maybe that's just me being biased because I'm from Ireland. Maybe if I lived in the United States, I'd care more one way or the other. But I do read this and I think, Nancy Pelosi, she's in the House of Representatives, she's passing legislation. What is this legislation that she's passing? How has she really helped people? Does she really have people's best interests at heart? Does she really have their best interests at heart? This legislation that she has passed during Obama's reign and during Biden's reign, what is this legislation? How has it really helped people? Because I look at America right now, and I don't know if this is going to be the most glowing recommendation of Nancy Pelosi. Who knows? Let's see where the dialogue takes us. But all I know is, she's been in, according to the article, she's been in the House of Representatives for almost 4 decades. Now, as an outsider looking in at the United States, do I think the United States has got better over those 4 years, or has it deteriorated over, not 4 years, those 4 decades? Over those 4 decades, has the United States ascended and continued to get better and better and better, or has it deteriorated across those 4 decades? When I would tune in to American politics, and when I look at America, when I look at America's biggest cities, and I look at their crime rates, so we're back here to physical safety again. When I look at how safe San Francisco is, New York, Chicago, when I look at these big cities, and I look at how safe they are now relative to how they were 4 decades ago, I think an argument could be made. And this is just me looking in from the outside. This is just me looking in. I've never been to New York physically. I've never been to Chicago physically. I've been to San Francisco once. And my experience of San Francisco, I wouldn't say it was particularly positive. I wouldn't say it was particularly positive. I felt uneasy. I felt uneasy. It felt as if I needed to be alert all the time, being on guard. Maybe it's the same in Chicago. Maybe it's the same in New York. When I listen or speak with American friends, listen to American commentators or speak with American friends, the general consensus is, in their own words, in the last 4 decades, they would essentially confirm the fact that from a physical safety standpoint, America and a lot of these big cities have deteriorated in terms of their physical safety. They are not as safe now as they were 4 decades ago. People feel uneasy. People feel as if crime is on the rise. The economic climate, we've spoken about this already in our previous article. People are feeling the squeeze. People are feeling the effects of inflation. The devaluing of the currency, in this case the dollar. People are feeling this. People have to pay tax. In the UK, it seems like every new piece of legislation that is passed revolves around increasing taxes. People have to pay tax in America as well. So not only are we feeling the squeeze financially with inflation, but tax still needs to be paid. And yet, people's physical safety Not only has it not stayed the same as it was 4 decades ago, but it's actually, one could argue, deteriorated. So here we have a very vicious economic climate, a tough economic climate, where the currency, where money in general, is being printed so much that the current savings that people have are devalued relative to what they should have been if there wasn't so much money printing. So people's savings are being chomped away. Gobble, gobble, gobble. Inflation's just devaluing people's savings. Because the more money that's printed, the more devalued the money becomes. Because there's more of it. And so people's savings take a battering. And then, of course, they still have to pay a tax. And of course, then, we have physical safety being more of an issue, especially in these big cities in America. So when I start to walk through my own logic, when I say logic, when I just start to walk through my own mind, I read this article, Nancy Pelosi. She's in the House of Representatives. I wonder how much money. What is Nancy Pelosi's net worth? In fact, let's have a little look. Because I don't know. Let's have a look and see. What is Nancy... We'll ask two questions. What is Nancy Pelosi's salary? And what is Nancy Pelosi's net worth? So, let's have a look. Nancy Pelosi net worth. Just to get a rough gauge. So, of course, we're not going to get a definite figure here. But let's just have a look and see what starts to get thrown my direction. So, former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has an estimated net worth of more than, wait for it, $278 million. Not too bad. Nancy's done well for herself over the last 4 decades. $278 million. Let's see what Nancy Pelosi's annual salary was. So we've got a gauge of her net worth. So Nancy Pelosi, annual salary. Let's have a look. Does it give me how much she makes each year? So, again, these are just rough figures, just so that we can fix the discussion, so that we have a framework in which we can sort of view who this Nancy Pelosi is. So, it seems she had an average annual salary of $142,000. Here's another one. Nancy Pelosi's annual salary is $174,000. And again, it's saying her net worth is about $240 million. Okay, so we've got a rough gauge here. So Nancy Pelosi, this stalwart of the House of Representatives, who's passed all of this legislation across these different presidencies. Just to recap, she has a net worth of approximately, let's be generous and round it down. She has a net worth of about $250 million. And every year her annual salary was in the range of $150,000 to $200,000 US dollars. I'm sure this individual seems very relatable to you folks. She's very relatable to me. Very relatable. You know, just 250 million net worth. She's not far off the Bandido's net worth. Not far off. In the same ballpark. So, anyway, the article. The article's talking about her career, basically. And I read an article like this. And I think to myself, how has America performed in the last 4 decades since Nancy Pelosi has been in the House of Representatives passing all of this legislation? How has America improved? Because surely someone who has a net worth of approximately $250 million and had an average annual wage of $150,000 to $200,000 US, surely that person must be contributing something tremendously valuable to society to be worth so much money. Surely there has been tremendous value bestowed upon society by Nancy Pelosi. Surely America must be on the ascent. Surely in the last 4 decades, America is better now than it was 4 decades ago. Surely it was. Surely crime has been reduced now relative to 4 decades ago. Surely inflation is not as bad now as it was 4 decades ago. Surely we're not paying as much tax now as we were 4 decades ago. Surely our overall infrastructure is better now than it was 4 decades ago. Surely our physical safety is better now than it was 4 decades ago. Now, I've already said that when it comes to all of these things that I've just spoken about, physical safety, inflation, taxes, crime, the quality of society, the quality of the buildings, the quality of the infrastructure in general, surely someone like Nancy Pelosi, who is worth so much money and who earns such a large annual wage, surely under people like Nancy Pelosi's guidance, surely America has gotten better. It seems that when we look at America now, compared to 4 decades ago, it seems like inflation is worse than ever. It seems like the money supply, more money than ever, is being printed, which means the currency is more devalued than ever. It seems like our physical environment is more crime-ridden. It's not as safe. It seems like buildings and infrastructure aren't as beautiful as they used to be. They aren't as resilient as they used to be. It seems like we're paying more taxes than ever. All of this legislation that Nancy Pelosi has passed, one would have to wonder, and maybe I'm talking out of my arse. Maybe my arse is talking right now. Maybe it is. But one could figure, one could imagine that all of those things should actually be getting better and not worse. One would think that this legislation, all of this legislation that Nancy Pelosi has been involved in passing, and all of the people who Nancy Pelosi has worked with in her career, one would think that the country that is the United States of America would be on the ascent. It would be improving in the majority of its metrics. Word on the street is that many of those metrics are actually not improving. They're actually getting worse. They're not even the same as they were 4 decades ago. So when I read an article like this, again, it's very related to our previous article about the reform local councillor and the education secretary whose name I cannot remember. And I really don't have any ambition to try and look up who her name is. The education secretary. The last article and this article, there is a common theme. These people, they do not know my circumstance. They live a very different life. They seem to have authority over my existence to a certain degree. They are very wealthy. They do not live in the areas where I live. And ultimately, they aren't really going to do anything more for my life. Really. They'll sit up there, they will talk, they will bitch among one another, have political attacks upon one another. And really, do I benefit? Again, the self-confessed selfish git that is the Bandido. I'm thinking, do these people really, are they the answer to my problems? Do they have the solutions to any issue that I may have? And I would argue, and I think the argument could be mounted, that these people live a very comfortable existence. They are very wealthy. They probably live in areas that aren't affected by the things that I've already talked about. They don't probably have an issue with their physical safety. Their kids can probably afford to take a taxi or two to whatever private school that they go to. The point here, I think the lesson, folks, really is, again, when we look at our own existence and we see this article that seems to be a dedication to Nancy Pelosi's 4 decades of work in the House of Representatives in the United States. We see this dedication article. And I read the headline and the first few paragraphs and I think to myself, once again, I don't give a shit. I really don't give a shit about this individual. And that's not me taking a pot shot at this individual, because this individual also doesn't give a shit about me either. She has her own life to live. She's very wealthy. She gets a big annual wage for what it is that she does. And we could dispute how valuable her legislation has been over the last 4 decades and her contribution to society. Because when we look at the trajectory that the United States has been on from 4 decades ago until now, one could mount a reasonable argument that the United States has deteriorated in many of these metrics. Which brings into question Nancy Pelosi's contribution and the contribution of her colleagues in the House of Representatives and elsewhere. How effective have they been at adding value to us, the ordinary citizens? I leave that question with you and see what answer you generate. All I know is, in exactly the same way as I've explained with the previous article, I am not waiting, and this is the lesson, I think, from this article too. It's a sort of overlapping lesson with the previous article. And the lesson is to not offload your problems to these people. These people do not know you. They do not know the intricacies of your own life existence. You do. You know you better than anybody else. And if you're determined and understand that you actually hold the solutions to your own existence, then you know what? It really doesn't matter what these people do. What they say, what legislation they pass, within reason. As we stand right now, it really doesn't matter. You hold the key to your own future. You just need to be paying attention, stop making excuses, and take some responsibility for your own existence. Be selfish. Look after number one, analyze number one, analyze what number one really wants from this life. As I've said before, the Bandido at 31 years of age is probably into the last 200,000 hours of his life. I really don't have time, in my opinion, to be offloading responsibility to people who do not know me and who probably don't care about me. So what can I do? What I can do is put the foot on the gas and start to figure out how I can craft my own enjoyable existence and not get caught up in offloading responsibility to politicians or other people. That, I think, is the key lesson, because when we see the track record of these politicians, one could mount, as I've said, a reasonable argument and say, what value have they really brought to society? What value has Nancy Pelosi really brought in the last 4 decades to the American people? Because when we look at the metrics, how much tax we're paying, how bad inflation is, the physical safety of towns and cities, when we look at these things, the prices of housing, the prices of groceries, which is related to inflation, when we look at these things, have they improved? One could say they haven't. Yet here we have someone being applauded for their 4 decades of service in the House of Representatives, who has a net worth of around $250 million. And yet, when we look at the fruits of their labour, are they really that valuable to society? Are they so valuable that they are worth $250 million? This is the thing, folks. The key thing is, and key is the word here, you hold the key to your own enjoyable existence. You just need to be paying attention and not making excuses and offloading your problems to somebody else who really doesn't care. If somebody really doesn't care about your existence, why would you be looking towards them to fix the problems within your existence? Why would you expect them to be able to provide the solutions to the problems that you're facing? You can do that because you know, number one, better than anybody else. Okay, so that's story number 2. Let's see what time we're on. We're on about an hour and 14 minutes, it would seem. So what I'm going to do, because I've rambled tremendously. We've found ourselves submerged in the political domain on this particular episode of News on the Tube. We've only got through 2 stories. This is what happens to the Bandido. When the engine's up and running, he gets very excited sometimes about particular stories. And excited he has been tonight. So, before I forget, let me jump over to the live chat and see if there's anybody engaging with the show. If anybody's left a comment, let's have a look here and see. Head over to the live chat. Now, of course, as I said last night on our episode, there could be nobody in the chat. I could be going over here with expectations. My expectations could be there may be people in the chat. There may be some questions or queries. There may be some engagement with the show. There may be no engagement with the show. If that is the case, well then so be it. So be it. We will continue on with the show, and we will of course be back for future shows. So maybe the engagement will come then. But let's see what awaits us over in the chat, if anything. So, it looks like to me we have a couple of live chats. And let's have a look and see what the people in the chat are saying. So, the first person that we have in the chat is Tuco. So we've Tuco. Tuco's in the chat. And let's read what Tuco has to say. Let's see what he thinks about tonight's show. What contribution is Tuco going to make? So Tuco says the following. 40 years times $150,000 equals $6 million. Now, isn't this interesting? Whoever Tuco is, Tuco has brought up, I think, a very interesting point with respect to our previous story about Nancy Pelosi. So Tuco, and for those of you, Tuco reminds me of someone. Now, we like our little movie references here on Bandido Talks. So Tuco, when I think of Tuco, when I hear that name, Tuco, do you know what I think of? I think of the bandit out of the good, the Bad and the Ugly. Has anybody ever seen the spaghetti western with Clint Eastwood? The Good, the Bad and the Ugly? Fine film it is. A fine film indeed. Maybe we'll do an episode some night on the Good, the Bad and the Ugly. But of course, Clint Eastwood's character, Blondie, in that movie, has to form an unlikely partnership with a Mexican bandit called Tuco. I'm not going to spoil the plot for those of you who have not seen the movie. But needless to say, Tuco is a bandit. He's a chancer. Sound familiar? He's a bandit and a chancer. And guess what? You know what I love about Tuco? He looks after number one. Can anybody feel the Bandido getting inspired by Tuco? Do you think the Northern Irish Bandido has derived any inspiration from Tuco? I'll leave that one with you. But what Tuco says, and Tuco, for those of you who watch The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, Tuco, he's a tuned in gentleman because he's not interested in dollars. He's not interested in currency. You know what he's interested in? Gold. He likes gold. And maybe he's ahead of his time. Because of course, for those of you who are into your economics, you will of course realise that it's quite difficult to print gold. The gold supply increases far slower than the fiat currency supply. It's far easier to print fiat money than it is to create brand new gold out of thin air. To get more gold into the worldwide gold supply chain, what do you need to do? You need to dig it up out of the ground. You need to get your shovel, or you need to get your machinery and dig up more gold. So gold is harder to inflate, meaning that gold retains its value much better than our modern fiat currencies. So maybe Tuco was ahead of his time. He knew that gold, being less prone to big inflation, that it was a better bet in the financial sense. So good on Tuco. But Tuco said something interesting here. So I think Tuco's talking about Nancy Pelosi. So Tuco's been listening very carefully to tonight's show, which is good. He's been listening very carefully. And what Tuco has said here, let me read it out again. So we were talking about Nancy Pelosi. And Nancy Pelosi, her net worth is 200. Remember, Nancy Pelosi is a politician in the United States. She has been in the House of Representatives for 4 decades. Her net worth, she's recently retired, it would seem. And her net worth is $250 million. And she had an average annual income of approximately 150 to 200,000 US dollars. Let's say 150,000, just to pick a isolated figure. So let me go over that. Nancy Pelosi's net worth at the end of 4 decades worth of work within the House of Representatives in the United States, her net worth is around $250 million. Her annual wage is about 150,000 US dollars. Now, Tuco in the live chat has been paying attention to tonight's show because Tuco has done some basic mathematics. Let me read out Tuco's mathematics. 40 years multiplied by 150,000 US dollars equals 6 million US dollars. That's correct. Tuco's mathematics adds up. It adds up. So the question I think that Tuco is actually posing here is, if $150,000 multiplied by 40 years equals 6 million, why is Nancy Pelosi's net worth $250 million? Where did the extra $244 million come from that makes up Nancy Pelosi's net worth? An interesting observation, one could say. And I think this is the observation that Tuco in our live chat is making. If Nancy Pelosi's annual salary is $150,000, that would mean approximately, at the end of 40 years of work, she should have around 6 million, let's be generous, and say she has 10 million. Let's say she has 10 million and not 6 million. Okay, so 10 million, that's how much Nancy Pelosi would have made at $150,000 per year. Instead of having 10 million or 6 million, she has $250 million. Does anybody find that interesting? Where all the extra hundreds of millions of dollars have came from? Is Nancy Pelosi looking after number one? Do you think Nancy Pelosi looks after number one? Do you think we could learn something from Nancy Pelosi in this sense? I'll leave that one with you. Good comment, Tuco. I like that. Tuco's been listening tonight. Let's have a look. We've got another live chat. This one's from Pat Mustard. Pat Mustard. People will, of course, in Ireland be familiar with Pat Mustard. Any of the international viewers of Bandido Talks may not be familiar with who Pat Mustard is. But Pat Mustard is, of course, the milkman in the Father Ted comedy series. Remember the milkman, Pat Mustard, out of Father Ted? He said to Mrs. Doyle, he wants to put his massive tool in Mrs. Doyle's box. Remember that, milkman, Pat Mustard? Quite a character he was. He was responsible for the Hurry Baby outbreak on Craggy Island. I would encourage you to watch that episode of Father Ted. It's an amusing episode. So we've got Pat Mustard himself in the live chat. Let's see what wisdom Pat Mustard has to offer us here on Bandido Talks. So Pat Mustard says the following. Homeschool or walk with the kid. Okay. So Pat Mustard has to be talking about our first news article. About the Reform Councillor going back and forth with the Education Secretary, whose name I cannot remember. So Pat Mustard, he's making a comment about that article, I think. And what's he saying? Homeschool or walk with the kid. So this whole idea of, taxis, the kid needs to get a taxi, but the families are feeling the financial strain of the current economic climate and they can't afford taxis, but then they don't want their child to walk to school because the physical environment in which we live now in our towns and cities, we could argue, is a little unsafer. It's not safe for children to be walking on their own to school. So we can see the dilemma for the parents. It's too expensive to be routinely ordering a taxi for their kids, but at the same time, they don't want to send their kids off walking to school because they don't think it's safe for their children to be walking on the streets. So what Pat Mustard is suggesting, a revolutionary suggestion, he's suggesting that you either homeschool or walk with the kid. Perfectly reasonable. I think those are reasonable suggestions. Now again, some people would say, I can't homeschool because I don't have time, and I can't walk with the kid because I have to go to work, and that's just not feasible. You don't have kids, so you don't understand. What did we talk about earlier? If the issue means enough to you, then I won't be hearing any excuses. People love to make excuses to justify whatever it is that they're currently doing and to justify the lack of need to change. Because we all know that having to make changes on this scale can be a ginormous pain in the hole. Having to walk your kid to school means you have to take time out of your day. Having to homeschool your kid means that you have to rearrange your own schedule. It's a labour. It's difficult. But if the issue means enough to you, and you're really looking after number one, and you're looking after who number one really cares about, then the issue will mean enough to you for you to start making changes to your existence. The benefit to making the change will outweigh any cost. So I think this is what Pat Mustard is actually saying. Pat Mustard is suggesting that you either homeschool your kid to avoid the use of a taxi or to avoid the kid having to walk to school in the first place. They're homeschooled so they don't have to go anywhere. Or you could simply walk with your kid from home to school and then organise your schedule in such a way so that you can meet the kid and then walk back. You're not out any expense because remember, we're using our limbs. All you have to do is rearrange your schedule. You're not having to pay for a taxi and you are there with your kid so you're able to protect your kid physically from any potential danger in the environment. Not a bad suggestion from Pat Mustard. So homeschooling or simply walk with your kid. Either one will work. Again though, what I like about Pat Mustard's comment in this case is again, it's getting at the idea of taking some personal responsibility for looking after number one. Because at the end of the day, Nancy Pelosi is going to be sitting in a nice comfy sofa, a nice comfy armchair somewhere in the United States with her 250 million net worth. And there will be other politicians and people who like to pass legislation and make decisions on behalf through government of the common normal citizen. There will be other politicians who are on a similar salary or who have a similar net worth or who are just very wealthy in general. And they really don't care about your circumstances. They'll tell you they care, but really, do they care? They are looking out for number one. And this is the thing. We give politicians abuse. I think we've talked about this in previous episodes. People in general like to slag off politicians for being dishonest, for telling porky pies. But there's something that we can really learn from politicians. And I think Tuco in our chat and Pat Mustard in our chat, they're kind of getting at this, which is what we can actually learn, what I admire about politicians. I'll tell you what the Bandido admires about a politician, about a modern day politician. What the Bandido admires about modern day politicians is the fact that modern day politicians make no effort to hide the fact that they look after number one. They have no qualms whatsoever looking after number one. To them, it is the most important thing in their existence. And they engineer their existence so that number one and the people who number one cares about are catered for comfortably. And I think I have to admire that about politicians. They really do look after number one. And I think we could all take a leaf out of this political handbook for life. How about we all start being a little bit more selfish and looking after ourselves, looking after number one. And stop offloading and expecting the knight in shining armour to gallop into our existence and just serve us on a platter what it is that we're after. Take a leaf out of the politician's book and say, you know what? I'm going to look after number one and number one only. So I think a fair comment from Pat Mustard and a fair comment from Tuco. I think those are all the comments that we have tonight. So I think that will draw tonight's show to a conclusion. An interesting show, a very political show tonight. We had 2 political articles. We only got through 2 articles. But I think there are lessons. I think the overall lesson from tonight's show and you're going to hear this a lot on Bandido Talks, is really, folks, when it comes to politics and politicians, we can choose to get irate and angry, and we can choose to dedicate time and energy to shouting at the television or shouting at the media article. But really, we ought to start learning from our political counterparts. They look after number one. So I think we should start to look after number one, or at least start to orient our perspective on life in that direction. Because again, without sounding like a broken record, nobody knows you better than yourself. Nobody knows your circumstances in life better than yourself. And as a result, I would argue that nobody knows the solutions to the problems that are arising in your existence better than you. No bitching, no whining, no excuses. The solution lies with you. The solution lies within, I would argue. And it doesn't lie within the hands of any politician or anybody else. Everybody else that you see on TV, all these wealthy people, politicians or otherwise, you can be damn sure they are looking after number one. So how about we start to look after number one too? All right. I think that's a wrap for tonight, folks. I want to thank everybody, in particular, Tuco and Pat Mustard, for getting engaged in our live chat. I want to thank everybody who has tuned in live here this evening to watch the show. Again, if you enjoyed tonight's show, feel free to give the live stream a like. If you're watching the live stream after it's been posted, get down into the comments section and let me know what you thought about the show. And then, of course, as I said in our little introduction, if you enjoy what we do here at Bandido Talks, feel free to become a subscriber to the channel and get notified about all of the content that will continue to flow in your direction. That is a wrap for tonight, folks. We will be back tomorrow night for our final live show of the weekend. 7 p.m. here on YouTube. We will be getting into more news on the tube. And if you feel like joining us tomorrow night, then don't hesitate. As I've said, Friday, Saturday and Sunday, we will always be live. We'll always be live here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Tomorrow night, it will be more news on the tube. So feel free to join us tomorrow night, folks. I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and all being well, I shall get chatting with you all tomorrow night, folks. Take care. Over and out from the Bandido.